Hi, I'm Nicky from Little Ones, and today I'm going to be talking to Rachel. Rachel is an experienced psychologist and parenting expert who has worked with children and families in general counselling, play therapy, women's refuge, education settings, children's care, domestic violence, and trauma counselling. She has a book, Teaching Kids to Be Kind, which is due out in November of this year. She has also delivered presentations at national conferences on topics relating to play therapy and trauma. She is going to be talking to me today about parenting, motherhood, about the emotional and mental journey we go on when we first become parents. We're going to talk about some tips and methods that you can employ to make your journey into parenthood a bit smoother. We're also going to be talking a bit about the pressures that women and mothers face today in terms of being a mother, being a partner or a wife, wanting to have a career, and then of course the pressures that are put on us by society, and in particular the pressures of social media on mothers. These are all areas I am very passionate about, so I am really excited to be talking to Rachel today, and I hope there is a lot that you're able to take away from this chat. So Rachel, can you tell me about your own journey into motherhood, and what did you find a struggle? What did you find easy? What was challenging?
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure I would be a mother. I've got a number of health issues that made having my little girl, let's say, a challenge and then a surprise when we got her. I'd never been, I'd never been the person that was like, yes, yes, motherhood, motherhood. So it was amazing that we got to have our little girl. And for me, I've always been a very career driven, I'm a hustler. Like, I've always got like 3 jobs on the go. And so for me, adjusting after actually having my baby was probably the challenge, that time was no longer my own. I had to do what I wanted. It was, entirely about this other little person. And I wouldn't change it for the world, but it was just, I can't just pick up my bag and go. Like, it's an hour long,
It's
like, performance.
consuming. It's consuming.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
consuming. It took me a little while to get back to a space where I felt comfortable being me, but also being a mum. Like, I think I can balance those two now. Probably the easiest part was, I had the easiest pregnancy. I was just happy and round, and had this fabulous pregnancy. And most women will probably be quite angry when I say I had no morning sickness.
I didn't either. Me either.
Yes. It's like this guilty little club. Yeah, but no, it was a beautiful pregnancy, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful, delightful character of a child. And so, it's been wonderful getting to know her. But yeah, the adjustment to the new role of being a mother, when my previous life had been so selfish and so much about only me, that it's definitely an adjustment.
And what did along that journey, what would you now give as advice to new mothers having experienced that yourself?
Yeah, I think it's almost that permission that it's okay to be Rachel, or it's okay to be Nicky, as well as mum. I think the role of mum can be so encompassing. We're full of this love hormone, or we're just so taken in by the minutiae of what it takes, to raise a baby, and the stress and the pressure as well of what it means to be a mother and the role of mothering. I think it's giving yourself permission to also be you, and that it's okay to still do the things that make you you, or find out what that looks like now with a little person in tow. And to find a village of people who support that.
I
Because
agree. I agree.
So other like-minded, I'm not just going to say women because your village can be men, it can be
Mm,
anybody, diverse group of people who get you and who support both of your roles, as a mother and as a woman, as a friend, as a sister, as an employee, as a community member, anything else that you really align with so that you don't lose touch of that stuff.
I agree. It's so important. And how, talking about that community or village, which we obviously like to call it a village, how do you think that, not necessarily that community you were talking about, but the communities we live in today, how do these communities, and it might be a physical community or an online community, how do these communities impact our experience of motherhood, do you think, or do you see in your profession?
Yeah, look, I really think that it's a bit of A, bit of B. So on one hand, you've got these opportunities that women and mothers and parents have never had before to connect, so there's so many more opportunities to meet like-minded people who share your views and to create that village that you talk about. But on the other hand, some of the messages that are in the community are very pressuring for mothers. You've got the keyboard warriors, you've got the people that, on social media who are, it's almost like a guilt or a shame, that they bring on, and it's under the guise of caring, caring for the baby, worrying about the mother and her intentions and her choices. But it's actually just, it's making women doubt their choices or decisions for their bodies and for their families and for their children. And so I think there's also that pressure as well of the Insta perfect families, that are
Yeah.
glossy and shiny and they've got it together, and they're not like messy top bun, food
Right.
stain. Yeah, laundry basket is yay high, full of stuff. And it's just that pressure, like, that's not me. Like, it's taken me 2 years to be able to do my hair again, that wasn't me. And it's those really high expectations that social media can have. And I think, in terms of like the physical community, I think that with people working more hours, more jobs, sometimes those opportunities to connect with your physical village, your physical people around you can be harder. The pressure on women to return to work sooner, they might not get that time to really develop that or go to their local mums group. Maybe there's financial pressures, real pressures, or maybe they want to go back to work. And so the role of mother can be sort of pushed aside to be an employee, which can be really great. That can be a really good balance for some women to leave mum at the door and be Rachel again or Nicky again. But for some women, that's really hard as well. There's not as many opportunities. So yeah, a bit of column A and a bit of column B. I think it depends on where you focus it and how you intentionally create your village.
I 100% agree, and I am quite passionate about, and especially in like an historical and like an anthropological perspective, um, the the role of the village and the community historically, and how it did literally take a village to raise a child, and now we parent in these tiny family units in
Yeah.
basically in complete isolation. And do you think that over the last sort of 50 odd years, there's been, I mean, and actually, I'm sort of thinking more since women came out of the home and moved into the workforce, and the big feminist movements. And do you think that motherhood has fundamentally changed in that time span, like, from sort of 50 years ago to now, and for the better or for the worse, arguably?
A really tricky one. I think so complex.
I love talking about this.
This is obviously my personal views is that women still have the same expectations as full-time stay-at-home mums, yet there is also an equal expectation for them to provide. and contribute to the household income. Not for every family, but there is a lot more pressure in society to do that, yet they call it the mental load. The mental load of the mother has not reduced despite a more equitable division of work duties. So there's some really interesting research out there about, you know, the hours that a mother spends on the mental duties of, you know, I know so-and-so goes to sport at this time, so we've got to be ready by this. The kit's got to be washed and dried so that they can do this. And blah, blah has art class and they've run out of paint and I've got to go to the shop and get some more paint or whatever it is. And knowing the minutiae of the running of the family household so it causes this huge kind of like stress and invisible disparity. And it's not because men don't want to participate or partners don't want to participate, but I still think there's that pressure for women, from sometimes women, about the role of mothering and contributing and things like that. And so I think in some ways that has changed in a positive way because it allows women to pursue other roles than motherhood if they want it, because let's not get away from that's what some women want and that's their perfect life is to stay at home with their children. More power to you, as long as you know that that's what makes you happy and what you want. And for women who want to pursue a career like I do, you know, mothering 50 years later, it allows me to go back to work. But I still think there's that real tricky, you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't, because you know, people go, oh, when I was working part-time, they're like, oh, you know, shouldn't be going back to work full-time, or when are you going to go back to work full-time? And when I've gone back to full-time, they're like, oh, don't you miss your baby?
No.
Don't you want to spend time with her? And I'm like, there's no winning. There's no winning answer here.
There is no winning.
Yeah.
Do you think that, you know, you're talking about that mental overload, what did you call it? Mental do you think that is something we do to ourselves? You know, I was reading something quite a while ago now about compensating. And so, you know, if you're thinking about it in terms of a partnership or a family or a relationship, we sort of overcompensate, which allows our partner to then undercompensate because we're constantly overcompensating. You know, we're doing it to ourselves as mothers that we are just so we just think we have to be the ones who are constantly thinking about the after school activities and the lunch boxes and the groceries and things like that? Or is there an actual, like, does society kind of expect us to think about those things?
I think possibly a little both. I'm really non-committal today. I'm like A, B, some of this, some of that. I think there's possibly a bit of both, and it really depends on who the mother is and her views on mothering and how she makes sense of that in her kind of schemas. So the schema is kind of like the shortcut that you create about everything in the world, and you have schemas about who we think we are. We have schemas about who we think mothers are, or, you know, wives are, or partners are, and so a lot of that is inbuilt in us in what do we think about those roles, and then how we interface with those roles when we come into them. Then there's also the dynamics of your partnership, if you happen to have a partner, and what you kind of pre-negotiated, or how you interrelate with each other, how you problem solve, how you deal with conflict, how you negotiate, how you communicate, all those communication things. So that comes into part of it as well. But there was some really interesting research, and I can't remember where I read it, so I probably shouldn't mention it because now it's just sounding
like you made it up.
Yeah, I'm making it up. Yeah, no. It was about roles and responsibilities, and they've done this research that women feel guilty for not doing stuff, and for men less so if they're not caught.
Every woman out there is listening to this going, I believe that.
But it's around so it was kind of this interesting bit, and it was to do with the mental load. I was reading this article on the mental load, and it's for men unless there's kind of been an overt like discussion around it, or telling them there's not as much guilt for missing something or forgetting something. Whereas women have a lot of that kind of tied to their sense of self, or their idea of who they are, or their idea about mothers and stuff. So they tend to feel more guilty for the things that they miss or forget, and are more likely to place importance on that. And I don't want that to sound like man bashing. It's not.
No.
I think it's how it's processed, and the roles and the normalization of the roles and things like that. That happens in society, and we're getting better. Like we really are, which is great from 50 years ago. Like you mentioned. That's still kind of a long way to go for how we create those roles and those community messages about who does what. And because you still get those horrible messages for men about, so let's just say I went out for a drink and someone goes, oh, so is your husband babysitting? No, he's parenting.
Yeah.
And not just, he's the father, he's looking after his child like we both do. And that really undermines men, and it really undermines their role in the family and their autonomy and their sense of self-efficacy around helping and being involved and feeling like they're contributing to the parenting load. So I think it happens on both sides, where we kind of create like the rock and the hard place sometimes.
Yeah, I've seen and heard, that whole situation of you're away. I mean, it's happened to me. I'm away quite often for work for a night, and someone will say, oh, how's Ryan coping with the kids? And I'm like, he's actually probably got more tolerance and patience with them than I do. Like, he's coping fine. They're his children.
And no one would really ask husbands that.
No. So if Ryan is away for the night, nobody asks me, how are you, or him, how's Nicky coping with the kids for the night without you?
Enjoying it. Yeah. It's very different frames.
I noticed that firsthand. Like, that's quite common, and it's really frustrating because, I mean, in our relationship, it's very equitable. Like, he just does it. I don't need to leave lists or anything. I might text him every now and then and remind him about scouts or something, but that's about it. So, talking about those roles and relationships, do you have any sort of tips or tricks or advice to new parents to help them through that big life change and how to navigate those waters together when they become parents?
Yeah, I would definitely not wait till you've had the baby to have the discussion. You're going to be sleep deprived. No one's at their bed unless, you've got a great sleep program. Anyway.
Who would tell that?
But you're going to be sleep deprived. You're not going to be your most logical, reasonable, rational. Don't have those conversations in the midst of brand new parenting. Think about it beforehand. It can be so hard to imagine how your life might change, and you can't over plan, because otherwise, you can be left feeling bereft that things haven't happened in a particular way, or you feel like you might have missed out on something, or maybe you're not parenting right if it's not happening in this way. But discussing your roles and what you expect from one another, and negotiating that is really important. And it's really important to have your non-negotiables. You can't argue every point, and you can't fight hand tooth and nail for every single thing. You've just got to have a couple of key no-go, like this is my line, this is my expectation, and that's that. And be really clear with each other about that.
But for things like the non-negotiables, are we talking things like, the hubby going, I still need to go to the gym every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Or, me saying I still need to spend $50 a week on coffee, or, like practical things like that?
It can be, or it can be emotional things like, I need you to ask me how I am, or I need some of my own space, or I need silence, or I need I need you to take over, or it can be emotional things, or it can be the really practical things. It depends what the bugbears are in your relationship. Having a baby kind of amplifies that stuff. You've gone from two people who can do your own individual stuff, still respectfully, interfacing with your partner, like, oh yeah, I'm going out with the girls this weekend, and they're like, oh cool, have fun. When you've got a child, that's more you've got to negotiate more in that partnership. It can amplify some of the, maybe the tricky or the challenging spots. So having discussions, real open discussions before you get to those challenges can be really important. And then also renegotiating, once you've stopped being so sleep deprived, what you're each going to be responsible for, and how you're going to take that on board with kind of minimal prompting from the other person, so it doesn't become a chore for one or the other. And so kind of your requirements of each other, and the things that you're gonna do to help your family run smoothly, because it's both of your family, and also how you can still have your relationship.
Yes.
So hard to remember that sometimes, and it's really easy to get into the role of mum and dad, and you forget, I'm Rachel, this is my husband, this is, our relationship that we have, which is separate to our child, and something that's equally important. And sometimes people feel really vulnerable or guilty about still needing or wanting to prioritize that.
Yeah, I think that is really, really important, because the water is we made all of those mistakes with our eldest. We didn't negotiate anything, we didn't plan anything, we just we planned the child, but that was about it.
Sometimes we don't even get to do that.
Yeah, and then we struggled, and it was like this. It was just warfare. It was, we didn't have expectations of what each other would do, but then I think I did, but I hadn't voiced them, and so I'm resentful about things that he's not doing when he doesn't know he should have been doing them. And you're right. She was a terrible sleeper. Everything was it just exemplified, and it was really, really, really hard. But then by the time you have your other kids, you're just so brain dead anyway. Nothing matters. But you are so right about having, defining your roles, and who's gonna do what. And I think even practical advice, like decide who cooks dinner on a roster each night of the week, things like that are things that have really helped us as well. Even with, our kids are older now, even still, it's like I take the kids to these activities, he does these activities. This is your night that you cook, this is mine, and you're taking the kids to school these days and I'm doing these days. It's just it seems so simple, but that's my advice also in this situation, is plan it, make lists, make rosters, because you're right, it could just start a big angry, guilty, resentful kind of cloud that I think a lot of people perhaps don't make it out of.
Yeah, and it's really hard to go from having 100% time for each other as well, and then having this really needy little person in the middle of that, and you both desperately love this new addition to your family, but it makes it really hard on your relationship, and you just don't have that time, or sometimes even that emotional capacity to go there and have those discussions while the baby's there, because you're tired, and maybe you are resentful, or maybe your hormones are making you really, sad or distressed or anxious or whatever it might be. And it's really tough. It's a really tough time anyway. And look, I like that tip, because I'm a type A personality. I love a good list. Checking off this makes my heart sing. So it won't, not everyone will go, yes, great tip, Rachel. Best ever. Even if you can just get good at communicating and instead of it being a vulnerability to express your needs, your partner's in there with you. They want to know what you need. Sometimes you just need to really tell them and lay it on the line so that you both know exactly what that means. So even if you just work on that as a communication rather than needing to plan everything, I think that's so key.
I was just thinking about what you were talking about earlier with how you need to still prioritize your relationship. And I was just thinking how true that is and how accurate that is. And I think also what goes hand in hand with that is understanding and accepting that your relationship is different now, and it's like irreversibly different because you've you've gone down this really different path in your lives together, but it will never be like it was before. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing or a scary thing. And I think it's really important for people to remember that, yes, it has changed. And then just start to explore how it's changed. And it might be that your romantic night is like getting the baby asleep at 7 and then watching Netflix on the couch with your fluffy jammies and the cat and a whole block of chocolate, and that's it now. But that maybe that's just what you need together instead of a glitzy night out.
And it's prioritizing that, and
Yeah.
it's taking advantage of those little moments and being really present. So I find it really hard when, people are on their phones all the time, and it lessens, because we talked about, the impact of, what happens 50 years, um, from 50 years in the past to now. And we're together, but we're so alone sometimes because we're just so separate on our phones or our technology, and so immersed and click, 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 and sliding and swiping and whatever else we're doing online. I'm not that technological, so I don't know what all the stuff's about and all the programs. I try to stay off it try to stay off it fairly religiously-ish. But yeah, it can also be, putting that down and actually, making that real time and that real connection, and actually being with your partner. Yeah, it doesn't have to be, going out for dinner. We couldn't go out for dinner for the longest time. My little girl just didn't like being in restaurants. She wanted our attention, and it was really hard to do that. So it's finding other ways and, getting creative, or it's also adjusting to maybe it's disappointment that you can't do that just yet. Some people, great, their babies are very portable and they can take them, and that's wonderful. And some not so much. So it's finding what works for you, and actually admitting or being okay if you're challenged by that, or maybe it makes you sad, or maybe it makes you frustrated, or maybe, you have any number of not so nice feelings that you probably judge yourself for having, but don't. It's so normal. It's so normal.
I was just thinking about taking your kids or your baby to the restaurant. In actual fact, that's actually something you should probably try and avoid, because it would be really nice to just have the two of you, we're always like, the kids go to bed at 7 and then we know they're going to stay asleep, so we'll get the in-laws or a babysitter, and we know that is our time, like 7 o'clock hits and it's our time. We can go out for dinner, we can go out to the movies, we can sit on the couch. It is very, like, mentally, it's like a big sigh of relief. I find it quite relieving. It's like it's grown up time. We don't have to talk. We can sit here in silence, but we're sitting here in silence together.
Yeah. And it's not, and I think there's a lot of, when we talked about sort of the roles of women and those expectations on women, sometimes it's a very martyred, selfless role. And sometimes we feel guilty for needing and wanting to have other things that make us feel fulfilled. Motherhood could be it. Motherhood could 100% leave you feeling fulfilled, or you could need to have other stuff too, and it's not feeling guilty about that.
So linked to that, actually, let's just talk quickly, or not so quickly, about the mum shaming that we talked about it a little bit earlier. And it is, we see it on social media, but you see it sometimes in the way people look, you know, people look at you, or I've heard people saying, they're at a cafe and they're feeding their baby with a bottle and someone's glaring at them, or they're breastfeeding their baby and someone's glaring at them. And
Oh,
you just, it is that sort of, there's that whole kind of mum shaming army. And it's
yeah.
like you were saying, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Whatever choice you make as a parent, there's somebody who's going to openly criticize you for it. What is that doing to us?
And not very good things, yeah. It's really tough because a lot of it is under the guise of the well wishes, like giving advice, like, oh no, you shouldn't be eating that when you're pregnant, or don't, oh, is that a decaf coffee? Oh, you
Oh,
know, it what those messages do is they undermine the confidence of the
yes.
mother to make decisions for herself and her family, and it leaves her second guessing that. And when women lose that confidence, they lose their way, and they then become reliant on things that they see online, or news articles that they're reading. And the news articles themselves might be great, but you see the comments underneath that are just
Yeah.
slating those choices.
Oh, you don't
Um,
have to tell us. You say the words baby sleep anywhere on the internet and we get slammed. Like, you would not believe, well, you might actually, being a psychologist, some of the comments that we see and receive from people who, and it still blows my mind that people can just be so nasty.
And it's under the guise of, I know
Yes.
best, and I'm stopping you from making a terrible decision. It's kind of this like, they can justify it because it feels like they're helping to them, to stop you from doing terrible things to your child by making certain parenting choices. And look, there are some certain ones that, yeah, we know are not so good. But when we do that, we lose our capacity to make decisions and to feel safe about what decisions we're making. And you know,
To trust our instincts.
yeah, that instinctual stuff, you know, or even, you know what, this is my family and this is what I need to make my family work, or to make other areas of my life work. And these are the decisions that I'm making. And actually, it's up to nobody else. It's up to nobody else. And yet people feel an intense need to comment and critique. And it's very damaging to women's self-esteem, to women's mental health. Um, to, you know, to that village as well, because as I said, then women will go online, and more often than not, you know, we'll see the Instagram mothers who are, you know, have it all together, like we said. And if you've got it all together, amazing. And if you're funny and glossy and beautiful, crack on, like, lovely. But for the mothers who don't, or already feel lacking because they've been undermined and their choices have been you know, not supported, that's a really hard thing to see. It leaves them feeling even less capable somehow, or, you know, less able to parent, and that's a horrible thing.
What would you say to those people who write those kinds of comments? What would you say to
Oh,
them?
just don't. I wish it was that easy. You know, I, I
Do
think
we
it's
need to
just,
put in a whole lot of beeps here for swear words?
oh, yeah, I'm trying to find a really nice, like, PC kind of way of saying nick off, like, just stop.
Yeah.
Um, it's not helpful. You know, if you're, in particular, if someone's making a comment about parenting choices, you know what, you came to that decision by making choices for yourself and your family, and that worked for you. And that's great that that worked for you, and you can communicate that without it being a judgment. So you can
Mm-hmm.
share and just say, what worked for me. If you really feel the need to share, which I don't mind, that's great. You know, there's so many different opinions. Do you know what? You might hear someone else's opinion and go, oh, gee, that sounds really great. Maybe I'll bring that into my parenting practice. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll go, that sounds terrible, and walk on by. But it's really about, if you do feel the need to share, frame it from the point, like the perspective of, well, when I did that, this is what I did and this is how this worked for me. And it doesn't have to be a criticism. It doesn't have to be you're doing it wrong because this is how I did it. Because that's still that person's parenting choice that 5 other people over there are going to be critiquing. So just think about how it's framed and how the other person might be receiving that. And you also don't know what else is happening in that person's day. If a person's reaching out for support online, maybe things aren't going so well for them that day. Maybe they need their village around them to go, yeah, you got this, mama. Yes, you're nailing this. Or look, here's some tips I tried, see what fits for you. I don't think they need that criticism. So being really compassionate about who's on the receiving end of that message, even if it's well intentioned, just being mindful.
Be kind. And
Exactly.
what would you say to somebody who is on the receiving end of this kind of mum shaming? They're second guessing, they're not sure what to do because somebody online just said, God, no, that's the worst decision you could ever make for your child. What would you say to them?
I would first of all be having a bit of a research, so get some facts. Have a chat to your doctor or your child health nurse. Have a chat to a professional, maybe a mental health professional, depends what the situation is. Find a professional that you align with, that you feel like you connect with and they hear you. Because just because someone's a professional also doesn't make them right for you. You've got to find a person that you actually connect with. So find that person. This is another person in your village. Find that person and ask them the facts. Google's a bit, if you want to Google, you're fine, but take it with a pinch of salt. Because just because someone writes it doesn't mean it's true. But find the stuff that aligns with your values, because everybody in the world has got a different set of values. They've got a different set of moral priorities. They've got a different set of life priorities and rules and ideas about what they need to make their life happy, fulfilling, their wellness, their well-being. It looks different for everybody. So really spend some time figuring out what that is first, finding some stuff online or through your trusted group of people that aligns with what you need for your life. I would also recommend taking maybe a little detox from being online and just, or doing a cull of, I'm only going to follow pages or sites, or I'm only going to visit sites that actually align with who I am and my beliefs and my values, so that the stuff you're receiving and seeing is more consistent or more likely to be consistent with what you believe. So kind of just filtering or taking some time away.
That's really good advice.
Yeah, detox.
Yeah, hard when you own an internet company.
Yes, you can't just filter out everybody. Yeah, but it's also, I think, when you hear those messages, if you're not confident in your role as a parent, those messages can feel more impactful. So the other day I got mum shamed by a lady in Coles.
No, you didn't.
Oh yeah, and I just told her pretty much where to go in the nicest way I could
What
manage.
did she shame you about?
My daughter pulled a jar off the shelf and I said, put that back on the shelf, please. And she looked at me and went, and dropped it and smashed. Bright red beetroot everywhere. And so I got down on her level and I was like, I asked you to put that on the shelf and you dropped it. And now we have some mess. And I was just in the middle of, having a bit of a conversation about choices. And some lady rolls past on her, with a trolley, and she's like, you need to stop that. She said, that was an accident. Don't you tell off your child like that. And I said,
What?
I was like,
I would die if someone said that to me. I would punch them.
Yeah. I'm quite confident in who I am and my parenting choices. And, look, I'm a human and I'm flawed and sometimes I make terrible choices. But on this occasion, I was setting some limits for my child that smashing glass jars in Coles is actually not a good thing to do. Basically said to the woman, excuse me, I had asked my child not to touch that and she did. So now I'm speaking to her about the consequences and about it not being okay to smash things in cold. And I said, I don't like that you have interrupted me and are talking to me about my choices. So I'm just going to continue my conversation with my child, and just turn back and continue. And I was just like, roll on, just walk past, just please keep going. And I'm like, but you know what? And I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I have vulnerabilities about, parenting choices, and you want to be perfect. You want to be the perfect parent. And it's not a thing. It doesn't exist. So there's stuff that we all feel vulnerable about and go, gee, could do better tomorrow. Maybe I'll try again. But for someone who's not feeling confident, and not confident in their parenting choices, that's just not helping. And it's about really getting to know who you are as a parent, and who you are as a person, and what you value and why you value it, and those non-negotiables for you as well. Again, those non-negotiables. What do you want in your parenting role, in being a parent, and how are you going to do that? And then the rest of the stuff is all just white noise in the background. It's just something that's happening that might be happening near you, but it's absolutely nothing to do with you. And it really, being able to answer those questions about yourself can help you to not be as impacted by those really young messages.
And that's actually a really good example, your Coles example, of somebody seeing a tiny part of that whole story and making a massive judgment call based on one little thing that they have seen, and they have just thrown their full opinion and judgment on this one part of the story without realizing or understanding the rest of the context. And I think that's what we see everywhere online, because we all know it's really hard to gauge context. It's, like if someone's writing something in an online forum or in comments on a post or an article, you're only reading and they're only writing a little part of the story. And so people are jumping on to judge and to shame and to disagree on something they actually know nothing about. And so I think it's important too for people to remember that they are the ones who know their child the best, and their parenting the best, and their family situation the best. And they just, and trust your instincts, I think, comes into it. Like, let yourself have instincts and trust them.
Yes. Pay attention to it. It's important. And some people in my work, some people will sometimes go, what do you think? Like, tell me what you think the right answer, what I should do here. And I'm like, without copping out, I can't. Like, I am not your own expert. You are your expert. You are the expert of your child, and it would be disrespectful of me to assume I knew more. And I think it's that. I think it's maybe not really respecting boundaries of other people when some people, not everybody, most of the comments out there are so lovely and so supportive, but for the ones that are not, is really sort of it's disrespecting, that other person's choices, and disrespecting their lived experience and their expertise as parents, and them making those choices.
Yeah, I totally agree. So then, what, in your opinion, is the thing or the situation or the experience that probably has the biggest impact on motherhood or new motherhood? If you could narrow it down to one thing that impacts our experience of motherhood the most, what would you say that it is?
I think it would be our own ideals of what we think mothering is. That will underpin your confidence as a mother, your choices as a mother, the values that you hold, how you interface with other people's expectations of you as a mother, society's expectations of you as a mother. It all comes down to those internal messages and schemas about what you think mothers are, who they are, what do they do, what do they like, what do they eat for breakfast, all those things that make up what each individual woman sees mothering as. I think that's the one
overriding factor.
Yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's just kind of just believe in yourself, I suppose. Know yourself and believe in yourself.
And if, being really open and honest with yourself, if some of those messages are maybe not helpful, maybe some of those messages that you have about who mothers are making you feel guilty because maybe you're not aligned with that, for whatever reason. Maybe your circumstances mean you have to go back to work and you were dead set on being a full-time stay-at-home mum, or maybe you feel guilty for really enjoying being a stay-at-home mum when you thought you were this career person and you built this ideal around being a career person, and now you're having a change of mind. Whatever. When we're not aligned with our kind of internal schemas and roles, we can feel really distressed and really upset. So being really, it can be uncomfortable, but being really open with what we're expecting of ourselves and how we're aligning or how we're meeting or not meeting those expectations.
Let's just talk a tiny bit, our last talking point, and let's just talk about the mum guilt, because we've talked that it's come into play for a lot of these discussions, how we place pressure on ourselves, or we feel guilty for going to yoga because we didn't tidy the house, or for doing this because we didn't spend an hour reading to the toddler their favorite book for the 1,000th time. How do we, is it normal? I don't like that word, but is it normal, this overwhelming mum guilt that we all feel? Literally every choice we make all day long is accompanied by guilt. How do we not feel the guilt so much?
In terms of it being normal, I think it's common, and I think we want to be the best mothers that we can be, and we do set high expectations for ourselves based on those kind of schemas that I mentioned. And the tricky part is that we have many schemas about many things. So you also have a schema about what it means to be a wife or a partner, or what it means to be an employee or a family member or a friend. And if you think about all the different responsibilities that you have in each of those different roles, there is no way that you can be doing that all of the time at the same time. It's just not possible. You just cannot do it. So it's being really mindful of not beating yourself up. Like if you catch yourself having those negative thoughts, going, okay, where is this coming from? Why am I feeling guilty? Is there something I need to address? Let's not beat around the bush. Sometimes we are selfish. Sometimes we do need to adjust our behavior or make a change or be more considerate of others or whatever. Sometimes there is that stuff. But sometimes it just comes from trying to balance all those expectations we have of ourselves and just not doing it very well because we can't, and being okay with it, we can't, and cutting ourselves some more slack. So you've got to notice that you're having the negative thought first, so that then you can kind of address it and counteract it with, generally counteract it with some reality. So like, okay, let's have a look at this. Okay, so I've gone to yoga for an hour. Does that actually make me a bad mum? Like if I'm breaking it down, like what does a bad mum mean? Does that mean going to yoga? Probably not. Do I feel guilty because of the pressures that I should somehow be spending all my time with my child and being Betty Crocker and, like baking from scratch and, all that? Maybe that's where that's coming from. But does that make me a bad mother? No, probably not. So
it's challenging your feelings and your thinking.
Yeah, exactly. With some reality of, okay, so is that thought based in any kind of reality, or is that, just an expectation that I'm having of myself? Is that realistic? Like, can I actually do that? Probably not. So yeah, catching them is sometimes the tricky part, though. We sometimes have the yucky, drudgy, guilty, shameful, black feelings. But if we haven't really thought about or kind of sat down and reflected on the thoughts that are kind of underpinning it, it's a bit harder to find something to counteract that and balance it with something neutral. It doesn't even have to be positive. Like you don't have to go, yeah, I'm doing yoga, so that makes me the best mom. Woo-hoo. Sometimes it's just neutral. Like, no, that doesn't make me bad. It doesn't need to go like all the way to the opposite end. But yeah, definitely catching the thoughts and noticing them is really key, and where those messages are coming from.
It's just so complex this whole world of motherhood, right? Like,
Right?
and fatherhood and parenting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many facets. No wonder so many people struggle. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Like
both
you
of us
talk,
are obviously passionate about helping people make their lives easier. So,
yeah. And when you talked before about, the village, because we no longer have that village around us of parents who showed us and
mm,
supported us and things like that, I think it can get more
mm,
complicated because we're reliant on so many pieces of information now to try and make our own truth that we
mm,
just get so caught up in, well, what is right, what is
mm.
right for me, because there's so many different options and so many different views out there now. It can get so confusing, and I don't think it needs to be.
No, and I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head when you said just find something you believe in. Find
Mm,
something you believe in, find some people you believe in, and basically just surround yourself with those things. You don't need the
yeah.
negativity. You don't need the people who are going to make you second guess yourself. Just surround yourself by the things, people that you believe in, and then
Yeah.
believe in yourself.
Also true.
Well, that's been a really enlightening and quite passionate conversation, I think. And I think
Thank
something that
you.
I think there's things in there that a lot of people can take out. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a topic obviously, yeah, quite passionate about, and
Yeah.
you know, any of the comments that I have made have been drawn from my reference. So it's not that they're the right things,
Mm,
but it's finding what feels authentic for you. So you might go, oh, Rachel, that didn't really connect with me. So for the people that are watching later, they might think, gee, I didn't really connect with that particular comment, but that one was bang on. That's okay. Because I
mm,
also am aware that, sometimes as um, psychologist or as a professional, sometimes people go, oh, that must be what you need to
yeah.
do. But it's still not true. You still need to find your stuff in that. And maybe I didn't represent every single gamut of potential feelings or family scenarios or situations. And it's not intentional, but I can only draw from my stuff. So
Mm,
my stuff is quite personal. So it might not have connected, but definitely starting those conversations about being true to yourself and finding yourself and believing in yourself is I'm hoping fairly universal.
I think that's just what it all comes down to is just finding what's right for you.
Yep.
And it sounds easy. It's anything but, I think, but all a journey. It's all a journey. Nobody's perfect, and there is no right way. There is no right way to do anything
Exactly.
except
Yep.
possibly to boil eggs, because that is a fine art.
Yeah, no, I'm failing at motherhood if that's one of the tasks you've got to get right. Not a thing I'm good at.
Well, awesome. Thank you so, so much.
You.
And it's been really lovely to talk to you and to meet
Oh,
you.
thanks so much, Nikki, for having me.